neighbor, welcome back to the USA. That's right, baby, the United States of America. I don't care what corner of it you're living in, what state, because every single one of you, all 50, have somebody who is the most famous band from your area. Today we're going to be exploring the most popular band from every US state. I got super curious about this and started looking around, and I found an article from this year on Insider. We're going to be diving into that and going in alphabetical order through every state to see who's the most famous. Roll Tide roll, because without a doubt Alabama coming in first, and who would have guessed that the most successful band of all time from Alabama is in fact Alabama. Not only was their hair game completely on point and out of this world, way past the limits of Alabama, as evidenced by this photo, you can see that they sold more than 73 million records in their time as a band. Okay, we got a solid start to the list. I think everybody can agree with that one. And as we move on to Alaska, we see Portugal the Man. I'm really excited to see them on there because I've seen them live a couple of times. I think they're fantastic at what they do, and they're also very involved in giving back to the indigenous communities in their area, and just the representation for a band from Alaska to have a top 10 Billboard hit and feel it still, to really have that notoriety, is awesome. Arizona, we got Alice Cooper, which I guess that counts. I mean, he does have a backing band. Arizona is definitely not a state I think of when I think of rock and roll. I think of deserts and dry heat rising from the airport, which is the only part of the state that I've ever seen. From Arkansas, or as I would always say when I was a kid, Arkansas, we have Evanescence, fronted by Amy Lee. This is surprising to me because after all these years, I didn't actually know that this band got their start there, but it does make sense given the Christian-leaning musings of their early records. For California, they're going with the Grateful Dead, and I do think this makes sense. And I know what you're thinking, John, there's so many bands from California, how could anybody possibly declare one as the winner? And I guess here, time has been on their side. We've had a little bit more time to actually see the impact that the Grateful Dead, Dead & Company, the various iterations have had on music, so I am definitely not complaining with the Deadheads here. Colorado, we have OneRepublic, a band that got their start on MySpace and just conquered the world. I mean, Ryan Tedder, their frontman, is one of the most in-demand pop producers out there, and regardless of how I or anybody else feels about that, I guess that is pretty cool considering Colorado for a long time wasn't exactly looked at as a jumping off point for a career in music. Connecticut has the Carpenters, and I think that's absolutely an ace up the sleeve that people from that region even might forget about. Delaware has George Thorogood and the Destroyers, whom I have never actually heard of, but considering Delaware probably isn't the #1 thing that you think of when you think blooming music scene, I guess that makes sense. Oh, they're the ones that did Bad to the Bone. Okay, I know it. They're one of those bands that you know but don't really know. Finally, we get a Florida man worth celebrating. It's Tom Petty. Tom Petty in the Heartbreakers, coming from Florida. I don't think anybody's gonna have any major disagreements with the legacy that they laid down, being celebrated as the most famous from their state. Georgia's an interesting one to me because I typically associate that state with like Atlanta and the hip-hop movement, but R.E.M. are listed as the most famous band to come from Georgia, and realistically, I didn't even know that they were from there. They're from Athens, Georgia, founded in the early 80s, breaking up in 2011. They're a great band, and I love what they did in their time together. For Hawaii, we have a band called Pepper, and the first thing that I thought of when I saw that was, oh, Pepper by the Butthole Surfers? But apparently that's not the case at all. Headed out to Idaho, the home of the potato farmers that make our nation grow aplenty with fries everywhere, we have Built to Spill, a band that, again, I've actually never heard of, but apparently they had a small reign during the early to mid 1990s with a bit of an alternative rock sound that critics seem to like. Illinois takes off with Earth, Wind & Fire, a group that have been very outspoken, collaborative, and important throughout the years. And honestly, I had no idea where they were from, because when you think of a band like that, I don't think you necessarily think, oh, where are they from? Because they just feel like they could be anywhere in the world, and that's pretty cool. Who could forget Indiana giving us the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson, the king of pop? It was all started here in this state that most people would not think of when they think of a band that ended up shaping music not just for their own stuff, but from what came of the solo careers beyond it. Headbang your way all the way through an Iowa road trip because the most famous band from that state are of course the metal titans Slipknot. This is a wild, out-of-control band, but you probably saw this one coming from a mile away. They're fantastic, and they have an album called Iowa. Now that's what I call State Pride, Volume 666. I'm noticing a disturbing trend here when it comes to bands who use their state name as the actual band name, or maybe even the album name as well. It seems like if they use the state name as their own name, then they become the most famous band in that state. So, Wisconsin, Delaware, Connecticut, Missouri, anybody else who is living in an underrepresented scene for music, it's time to rise up and name your band after your state. Who cares if the SEO will be terrible? You'll be famous! I don't know why, but My Morning Jacket being the most famous band to come out of Kentucky actually makes so much sense. I don't even know this band that well. I didn't even know that they were from Kentucky. In fact, my first exposure to them was through the show American Dad, where they were kind of central to the plot of an episode.
Anything else I can do for you?
Thank you for the music!
Okay.
Louisiana's pride and joy goes to the Neville brothers, an R&B group, which really does make sense considering when I think of Louisiana, I think of R&B, I think of soul, I think of Mardi Gras and the parades in the street. It really is such an interesting, eclectic sound, and the Neville brothers were at the heart of that, clearly. Interesting results over here in Maine. We have Rustic Overtones, and I don't know if I'm the only one drawing a complete blank on that. I mean, I thought the most famous band from Maine would be the Maine, but it turns out I've been lied to, and they're from Arizona! You learn something every day, and I did not know that the Orioles were often credited as the first ever R&B vocal group, so there you go, Maryland, putting yourselves on the map with an iconic piece of history. I certainly wonder where the band Boston are from. It couldn't be Massachusetts, could it?
Let's split up and look for more clues.
Michigan are holding it down with the Temptations. This is an iconic group that formed, I believe, in the early 60s, according to this, 1961. They had so many hits that I'm sure you recognize because so much of their stuff has been covered over the years, like My Girl. Minnesota's claim to fame is Prince and the Revolution, and what more of a legacy could you ask for? And from Prince and the Revolution, we take a Mississippi mudslide into Three Doors Down, who, being from Mississippi, just looking at them now, that actually makes so much sense. I feel like my third eye has been opened, and not that it was blind, it was just 3 doors down. For Missouri, they've called Ike and Tina Turner the most successful band. Considering they were a duo, they had a long string of hits over the course of decades. That makes a lot of sense. And Tina in particular had a massive solo career, so I'm not even gonna argue with this one. I was really curious at who would get picked for Montana because it's such a wide open state. You think of fields and bales of hay and John Mayer going off to relax in his hideaway cabin somewhere. But I did not think of Silkworm, a band that I do not associate with anything because I only know of a silkworm as something I would find in my yard. Continuing to baffle, I had no idea that the Conroe Burst fronted band Bright Eyes were from Nebraska, of all places. They always struck me as very East Coast. Nevada giveth and Nevada taketh away, because apparently Imagine Dragons are what Insider are calling the most popular band to come out of there. I mean, are we just erasing the history, the legacy of an actually really important band that's going to be remembered 50 years into the future, like the Killers, who also saw massive commercial success, who continue to be headliners for festivals all over the globe? But no! Let's just give it to Imagine Dragons. Looks like we've solved the mystery of where the toys in the attic were hiding away, because Aerosmith are plastered all over the billboard for New Hampshire. With them being active for more than 50 years, this is a no-brainer. Although at this point it would be great if they maybe just retired and went away. New Jersey, we got Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, okay? That's my worst accent that I can do, so you tell me. Now this is where it gets really interesting for me, because this is what I set out in hopes of finding. Bands that surprised me and I think will surprise you too. The Shins are listed as the most famous, well-known band from New Mexico, and they definitely had a lot of acclaim in that indie scene in the early 2000s. New York, New York, there are so many choices and so many bands that this could have gone to because this is a thriving population of musicians, but it went to the Ramones, and as Insider themselves say, they could have given it to Kiss, the Velvet Underground, the Beastie Boys, but they went with the Ramones because they have innumerable hits from Blitzkrieg Bop, I Wanna Be Sedated, and Sheena is a Punk Rocker. The moment that we've all been waiting for, if you know what state I'm from, North Carolina. What is our defining act? What have we left? Where is our footprint in the sands of time? And I have to tell you, it's not down in Georgia, it's actually here in North Carolina, but the devil did go down there. Keep playing that fiddle in the sky, Charlie. We'll never forget what you did. The band listed for North Dakota is a little befuddling. It almost sounds like a lounge act band that would be made up for a movie. It's Bobby V and the Strangers. Ohio is home to the Isley brothers, whose work has lived on in so many different ways. The songs themselves, the samples, just absolutely massive. I was almost positive that Oklahoma was gonna have a band called Oklahoma as their most famous, but instead we have the Flaming Lips, and I think that's a bit more of a cool, outside of the box pick. You've got Wayne Coyne and company just really doing their psychedelic thing. Another one of those bands that you would probably know less from being on the radio and more if you're involved in the live concert community is the Decemberists. They're apparently the most famous band to ever come from Oregon, and that makes sense to a degree. They do kind of have that hipster flair that would appeal to people of that state and beyond. I've liked some of their stuff, but nothing as much as Down by the Water. Vibing our way through Pennsylvania, which is a state I have a connection to because that's where my partner is from. Hall and Oates, this iconic duo. I mean, this is what you think of when somebody says, name a more iconic duo. I'll wait. Hall? Oates. Very cool to see the Talking Heads gaining notoriety is the most famous band to come out of Rhode Island, a state that I often forget exists. Sorry to any of my Rhode Islanders out there. South Carolina says it's time to crack the rear view because it's Hootie in the Blowfish, baby. To speak my truth though, I have never liked Hootie in the Blowfish. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and this one says it all. Being a struggling musician in South Dakota, I'm sure it is definitely not an easy grind, but here you have the spilled canvas rising from the ashes and becoming a pretty famous band for South Dakota. I mean, a lot of you probably don't know who they are, but I guess I was fortunate enough to know them in their heyday. Is anyone really surprised that they're considering the most famous band from Tennessee to be Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Three? I'm not debating it, you're not debating it, we're just gonna keep moving on because it's true. Beards, hats, and glasses. For more than 50 years of service, ZZ Top, we salute you, being the most famous band from Texas. You couldn't have asked for a more holy union than the Osmonds coming from Utah, because that just is a stars aligning, oh yeah, light bulb just went off, that makes sense moment for me. Donny Osmond and the crew, they're from Utah. Middle-aged men absolutely love Phish. I mentioned them earlier, it's nice to see them pop up, I guess. The most famous band holding it down from Vermont. I listed them when I was talking about bands that have like massive live followings. There's so many bootlegs, everybody comes out to the show, they jam, they're one of those bands like the Grateful Dead. Another strange connection I'm starting to notice here, we've got the Dave Matthews Band as being the most famous from Virginia, which I find it hard to disagree with considering how huge they were and how out of the loop you can feel if you're not actually in the fandom. I'm noticing that all of these live acts, the ones that really develop those hard, tight-knit communities of them playing all of these shows, playing something different every night and having a big emphasis on the other members just jamming in the background, they take over. So not only if your name is in the state will you be famous, if you just start jamming on stage you will be too. Washington State was ground zero for the grunge movement, so of course the Seattle-based band Nirvana being the most famous to ever come out of that state is something that almost nobody would disagree with. Washington, D.C., not a state, it is the District of Columbia, but we're gonna give our hats off to Minor Threat. Minor Threat. Sorry, West Virginia, but it looks like you've been asleep at the wheel, even though in this picture, this man looks fully awake. Let me go on like a blister in the sun. Apparently having that one big hit and one minor hit in the album is enough to make you the most famous band from Wisconsin. So to all of my Wisconsinians out there, start a band. band, take over the world. And finally, on the other end of the golden alphabet rainbow, we have Teenage Bottlerocket as the final band on this list. They're listed as being the most famous from Wyoming. I'm familiar with some of their stuff, kind of in the pop-punk world. They had some stuff in the early 2000s. I have a friend that's pretty into them, likes their stuff. I like their sound generally. It can fall a little bit flat over time, but I guarantee you probably know their logo. That's the end of our cartography lesson. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section down below, and you can check out the full list over on Insider. There's a link for that in the description. Please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new in town, and let me know what your favorite band that hails from your state is in the comments. Other videos on screen, and I'll be back soon for more on Beyond ARTV.